The golden afternoon sun streamed through the glass walls of the Velvet Spoon, painting soft reflections across crystal glasses and silver cutlery. The air shimmered with chatter, laughter, and the faint sound of jazz flowing from hidden speakers. Every table was filled, the city's elite enjoying their expensive lunches under a sky so clear it almost looked staged. But amid all that brightness, one table carried a different kind of heat. Edward Hale sat there, mid-40s, perfectly tailored navy suit, a gold watch that caught the light every time he moved his hand. His voice cut through the restaurant like a blade as he boasted to his associates about a new skyscraper deal worth millions. Everything about him screamed control, from the way he held his wine glass to how his smirk barely left his face. But just 2 tables away, a young waiter named Liam Carter adjusted his apron nervously. Barely 23, with kind brown eyes and sleeves rolled neatly up to his elbows, Liam had been working double shifts to cover his mother's hospital bills. He moved carefully between tables, balancing a tray of sparkling water and glasses, the sunlight bouncing off the rim. Then it happened. A small, almost invisible mistake. As Liam refilled Edward's glass, a few drops of water slipped from the bottle's lip, splashing across Edward's perfectly pressed cuff. The sound was tiny. The silence that followed was enormous. Edward's jaw tightened. His friends froze mid-laughter. Across the room, forks hovered above plates as people sensed tension thickening the air. Liam's heart dropped. He instantly pulled a napkin from his pocket, stammering, "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean—" But Edward's glare stopped him cold. "Do you know how much this suit costs?" His voice, though calm, carried venom, sharp enough to make the nearby diners flinch. Liam swallowed hard. "I can clean it right away, sir." "Clean it?" Edward scoffed. No. You've already ruined my afternoon." He turned to his companions with a smirk, loud enough for the room to hear. "This is the problem with hiring people who can't handle a simple task." Liam froze, every muscle tense. The restaurant manager, Sophie, peeked from behind the counter, her eyes full of worry. She'd seen this kind of thing before, but not this public, not this cruel. Edward leaned back, crossing his arms. "You want to make it right?" he asked coldly. "Then kneel. Right here. Apologize properly for wasting my time." The sound of clinking glasses died. The jazz stopped feeling like music. Liam blinked as if waiting for him to laugh, to say he was joking. But Edward's eyes didn't move. They were hard, hollow, and serious. The restaurant went still. Someone gasped softly. Another diner whispered, "He can't be serious." But no one moved. No one spoke up. Liam's face went pale. His throat felt dry as he looked down at the marble floor. The hum of air conditioning was the only sound between them. Slowly, painfully, he bent one knee, his reflection trembling on the polished tile. Whispers spread through the restaurant. Some people turned away, unable to watch. Others pulled out their phones, recording the moment. The injustice was too unreal to believe, yet too real to ignore. Sophie took a step forward. "Mr. Hale, please," but Edward cut her off. "Do your job, Ms. Reed, or I'll find someone who will." Her lips quivered, but she stopped. Liam looked up at her, not with anger, but quiet understanding. He didn't want her to lose her job, too. The boy's voice shook as he said, barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry." "Sir?" Edward leaned forward, satisfied. "Louder," he said. And that's when something changed. The sunlight caught Liam's face. His eyes filled not with shame, but with strength. He straightened his back slightly, still on one knee, and looked directly at Edward. "I'm sorry that your pride is worth more to you than someone's dignity," he said softly. The words were quiet, but they hit like thunder. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Edward's smirk faltered. His partners looked uneasy, suddenly realizing how the scene might look online. A millionaire humiliating a young waiter in broad daylight. But before Edward could speak again, another voice cut through the silence. Calm, steady, unshaken. "That's enough." Every head turned. An older woman had stood from a corner table, silver hair neatly pinned, a beige cardigan over her shoulders. Her presence commanded quiet without effort. Even the servers stopped moving. Edward blinked, his face drained of color, because he knew that voice. The woman stepped closer, her eyes locked on him. "Edward Hale," she said slowly, her tone both gentle and fierce. "I never thought I'd see you like this." Edward's lips parted, but no words came. The restaurant seemed to shrink around them, sunlight spilling across the floor, catching dust motes in the air like frozen time. Liam remained on one knee, frozen in confusion, his gaze shifting between them. Whispers erupted again. "Who is she?" someone murmured. "Does she know him?" Edward stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. His confident expression was gone, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. The woman took one step closer. "You've forgotten, haven't you?" she said softly. "Forgotten where you came from. Forgotten who helped you get here." Liam's heart pounded. Sophie looked on, stunned. The restaurant that had once been full of noise and pride was now wrapped in stillness. Every pair of eyes was on Edward. the once untouchable businessmen, now cornered not by power, but by the truth carried in an old woman's voice. Edward's lips trembled slightly as he whispered, "Mrs. Dawson?" She didn't answer, only looked at him with quiet disappointment that cut deeper than anger ever could. The silence that followed was unbearable. The light shifted across the tables, catching the edges of silverware in trembling hands. Edward's partners exchanged looks, realizing the moment was far from over, because what happened next would change everything. The entire restaurant stood frozen, watching as the woman, the one Edward once called teacher, slowly approached him. And in that instant, Edward Hale's past had just walked back into his present. If you believe no one deserves to be humiliated for earning an honest living, hit the like button and share this story, because dignity is worth more than pride. The sunlight poured into the velvet spoon, spilling across polished glass tables and gleaming silverware, bathing everything in a golden warmth that contrasted sharply with the chill gripping the room. But even in that warmth, the silence was heavy, thick with tension, disbelief, and shame. Edward Hale, once the loudest voice in the restaurant, now stood frozen in place. The woman before him, calm, steady, and unshaken, was someone he hadn't seen in decades. Yet her voice carried the same quiet power that had once guided an entire classroom. "Mrs. Dawson," he finally whispered, his voice cracking. Margaret Dawson took a slow breath, her gaze never leaving his. "Edward," she said softly, "I wish I could say I'm surprised." Every diner leaned in, every camera phone lowered slightly. Something about her presence silenced even the whispers. She wasn't angry. No, anger would have been easier to dismiss. What filled her voice instead was something far harder to face. Disappointment. "You were once that boy," she continued, her voice trembling just slightly. "The one who sat in the back of my classroom, trying to hide the holes in his shoes. The boy who used to skip lunch because he couldn't afford it. Do you remember?" Edward's throat tightened. The sunlight caught on his gold watch, the same watch that had once been his symbol of success. But right now, it felt like a shackle around his wrist. He opened his mouth to speak, but she didn't give him the chance. "You were laughed at," she said, her eyes glistening now. "Bullied by the same kind of men you've become. And I remember the day they called you worthless, and you ran out of class. I found you behind the gym, sitting on the steps, and I told you, never let success make you forget how it feels to be small." The words hung in the air like sunlight caught in dust. Liam Carter, still kneeling on the floor, stared in disbelief. The woman who had stopped everything, the one who had silenced the room, was standing up not just for him, but for something much deeper. Edward's business partners shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them cleared his throat, mumbling, "Edward, maybe we should—" But Margaret's sharp glance froze him mid-sentence. She turned to Liam, kneeling beside him with the gentle care of a grandmother. "You don't belong down here, son," she said softly. "Stand up. No one has the right to make you kneel for honesty." Her hand, steady, warm, unashamed, reached out and helped him to his feet. The room erupted in quiet murmurs. Even Sophie, the restaurant manager, wiped a tear from her eye. The tension that had held the room hostage began to unravel, replaced by something unexpected, collective reflection. Edward's eyes followed her every move, his jaw clenched, his face tight with 1,000 buried emotions. For years, power had insulated him from guilt, from shame, from memory. But now, those walls were cracking. "Mrs. Dawson," he began again, his voice barely above a whisper, "I didn't mean—" She cut him off gently. "Didn't mean to humiliate a young man trying to make a living. Didn't mean to demand submission from someone earning his bread through hard work. Edward—" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes now. "I taught you to build, not break." He looked around, at the diners still watching, at the phone still recording, at the reflection of himself in the restaurant's mirror-like glass. The image staring back wasn't the confident mogul he liked to show the world. It was a man lost inside his own success. A heavy pause followed, stretching long enough for every heart in the room to beat in unison. Then Edward took a step forward. His voice trembled. "Liam," he said, eyes downcast, I'm sorry, truly." The young waiter blinked, caught off guard. Edward took another breath. "You didn't deserve that. None of it." His tone cracked mid-sentence. "I let my pride speak louder than my humanity." The entire restaurant stood still, not because of the apology, but because of the sincerity bleeding through it. For the first time in years, Edward Hale sounded human. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his business card, holding it out to Liam. "I own a new dining chain," he said quietly. "We need someone responsible to train our new staff. You've just proven you have more grace under pressure than most people I've ever met. If you're willing, the job is yours." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Liam hesitated, unsure whether to believe him, but Margaret nodded toward him, her eyes gentle. "Take it," she whispered. "Not for him, but for you." Liam slowly accepted the card, his hand still trembling. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. Edward nodded, unable to meet his gaze for long. Then, turning back to Margaret, his voice broke once more. "You were right, Mrs. Dawson," he said. "Somewhere along the way I forgot what really matters. She smiled softly, not triumphant, but forgiving. Then remember now, she replied, because it's never too late to start again. The restaurant burst into soft applause, hesitant at first, then stronger, filled with something deeper than approval, relief. The tension that had suffocated the air finally lifted. Edward looked down, his reflection shimmering faintly in the glass wall beside him, sunlight streaking across it, distorting his image. He no longer saw the successful magnate or the ruthless businessman. He saw the boy in second-hand shoes, the one Margaret had once believed in. Tears welled in his eyes, though he blinked them back. Liam stepped away, joining Margaret as she guided him toward the door. The golden afternoon light outside painted their silhouettes across the floor, long and soft, like two figures walking out of a story. One restored, one redeemed. Edward remained standing at the table alone amid the soft applause fading into murmurs. His reflection still stared back, haunted, humbled, and human. Margaret paused at the doorway, glancing back one last time. Their eyes met, and in that moment Edward understood. Forgiveness wasn't given to ease his guilt, but to remind him of who he once was. As the doors swung shut behind her, sunlight flared across the marble floor, and the echoes of her words lingered like music. True success isn't measured by how you treat the powerful, but by how you treat those who serve you. The camera lingers on Edward. Still, silent, a man changed. Outside, the sunlight gleams off the street as Margaret and Liam walk side by side, disappearing into the glow. Inside, Edward stands motionless by his table, his empire still intact, but his heart finally awake. What would you have done if you were in Edward's place? Tell us in the comments, because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change the loudest hearts.